The Scalan Seminary was set up to try and allow priests to train, well, seminarians to train for the priesthood. At that time, there was less than about 2% of the population were Catholics, and they had previously tried to set up seminaries in Scotland with little success. It sits at the foot of the Ladder Hills, just on the border with Aberdeenshire, over in Tomintoul. It's a very, very remote location. In fact, when you walk the pathway up to it, it's only in the last few hundred yards that you actually see the building. So this was a very good location to set somewhere that was secret and out of the way, because it wasn't easy to spot it, and you got good warning if somebody was on their way to dig you out. The Redcoats used to quite frequently walk through from Corgarth over the hills and pass by. That's what I was referring to. They would turn a blind eye, you know, they'd just walk on and ignore it. But then from time to time, there were incidents like the burning down of the original building. They could train the priests there. Unfortunately, it went through very turbulent years. The actual building was burnt down, and they ended up rebuilding, but not without many years of hardship. I think for the seminarians it was a hard life, but the vision of the seminary was that it should be education all the way through. So from a very young stage, it wasn't just like, we've left school and now we're going to study to be a priest. And so they were young boys, and way back there is documented evidence about 1743 or something, the boys in the recreation time digging out a pond with a dam so they could go and swim in it and splash around and just have a good time. I don't know that I won't be doing it in this day and age with our weather. Interestingly, an old croft in the Scalan site was there, and they were able to take that over. The Duke of Gordon at that time was very keen to allow this sort of thing to continue, and it was sort of treated with a bit of respect, and we pretended that we didn't know about it sort of attitude. And it's quite interesting that where nowadays we look at it as a set of farm buildings, it actually was also a farm as well as a seminary. Obviously they had to grow their own crops and things like that. So from the original site, where we now have the seminary, that was a garden area that they grew peas and kale and herbs for their kitchen.
Well, there are two mills because there were two farms. Pretty well maybe could call them crofts, but there were two mills. They're called thrashing mills, and they were used when the farmer took in their harvest and they took in their sheaves of corn. They were designed to take the seeds away from the straw, and the seeds were put in bags, and some of them would be bruised, as we call them, and fed to cattle, and also the straw would have been fed to cattle. But way back in the olden days, there was another mill in the Braes here, and it was a meal mill, and the people took their oats to the mill. It's the mill of Auchnaskra. They took their oats there, and they got them made into meal for porridge and brose, and also for flour for baking.
Probably the most momentous thing that took place was the consecration of Bishop Hay. He's the only bishop to have been consecrated there, and of course he was one of the mainstays of the setup of the seminary. And it was him that in 1799, when they stopped using it as a seminary, he was the one that moved them to a quarters near Inverurie, because by that time there were better roads. Being in such a remote area wasn't really very beneficial. They really needed to be more close to the hub of things. But it very much looks as it did when Bishop Hay and the boys left in 1799. When they rebuilt the first building that was burnt down, and it's in the present site that it's in the early 1770s they added, and then in the late 80s they raised the upper floor and put in basically another floor and put the roof on. So that was how it looked when they left. The future of Scalan, I would hope, would be that it's still standing in another couple of 100 years' time and that people are still coming and visiting it and finding out how, in such a remote place, really it helped to establish the priests of Scotland as we know them now. If it hadn't been allowed to continue through the fortitude of the men of that day, we wouldn't have the priests that we have